morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Late last night I was scouring the internet thinking, oh my gosh, I can't find a story for tomorrow. I can't find any stories for tomorrow's Morning Movie News. Come on, Hollywood, announce something. And then I came across a small story that brought a genuine smile to my face. And I knew I had my lead story. And that's the announcement that Shane Black is going to be doing a Predator reboot. This is a great story. Now, first of all, they've been doing a lot of 80s Redux films. And of course, the first Predator came out in the late 1980s starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And a lot of us have complained about redoing these films because there was nothing wrong with the originals. Of course, "Get to the choppa" is a famous line from Predator. And Predator has a really wonderful fan base to this day and very good audience recognition. I was at Comic-Con last year and I got to go to the Predator booth because they were releasing like a 3D Blu-ray, and they were doing these great custom action figures where you could scan your head into a machine and then you could get an action figure in the mail a few weeks later of the Predator holding your dismembered head. And I'll put a link to that video at the end of this one because I had a great time in the booth. They had a guy in a Predator suit. It was just a lot of fun. Even though the movie's so old, it still brings up a great sense of nostalgia and just pure joy, as so many of those great 80s action movies have done. The Expendables is riding that nostalgia wave of joy still. So you might at first be like, how dare they remake Predator? But I think it's a brilliant idea to bring in someone who was very successful at the same time, Shane Black, writer of the Lethal Weapon series. That's what put him on the Hollywood map. He's done some other really great films, which we'll get to in a second. We've discussed him before because you might recall that he recently did a little film called Iron Man 3. So I think to get somebody who was both successful in the 80s and today and understands the sensibility of that period of filmmaking and why it was so popular, I think it's brilliant to bring him in to do this reboot so that it can remain faithful. I mean, there are certain different trends that are popular today, gritty realism, for instance, but, I think Shane Black realizes that, but can still retain some of the elements that made Predator so successful in the first place and that we remember and want to see again. So as long as Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't in this thing, I do not want him to come back. I'm holding judgment on the Terminator reboot. I don't know why it's a reboot and yet Arnold Schwarzenegger is still in it, but we'll see. But with Predator, I would like to see an entirely new cast. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think he has his hands full with Terminator and trying to revive his career there. He's just so far behind and really hurts the films he's in today so much at the box office that let's let Predator, the Predator is the star here, not Arnold Schwarzenegger. Some of you might disagree with that, but I think we could do something really interesting. Now, another person who was in the film, the original Predator, was Shane Black. This story where I discovered it was on Bleeding Cool, and so I want to give credit to them for the research on this, but they discussed the fact that Fox, when they first made Predator, wanted Shane Black's input. Of course, because he was such a hot commodity back then. But instead of paying him, they came up with the clever idea of casting him in a small role in the movie. He's the guy with the glasses. And then asking him when he was on set if he could do some rewrites. And now, of course, Shane Black said no, and it turned out just fine. Everybody loves the movie. But I think that's a very funny, underhanded way of trying to get someone to rework your script. And certainly very creative on Fox's part. You have to give it to them. And I wonder if hey, any writers out there, would that work with you? If you were getting a part in the film, would you be like, okay, I'll fix this? Or just my lines. I'll just fix my lines. And then I'll become the star. But Shane Black, he's gone on to, he disappeared for a while because he had his own box office flops. But he did some great films. Besides Lethal Weapon, he did Long Kiss Goodnight, which unfortunately he wrote that film, which was one of the films that started to make him go away, because even though it's a phenomenal movie, and I've mentioned it here before, it didn't do very well at the box office. Gina Davis and Samuel L. Jackson star, and Rennie Harlan, I believe, is the director there. Great movie. And then, of course, his directorial debut, I believe, was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, another fantastic film. It's like L.A. Caper with Robert Downey Jr., and Val Kilmer. I believe Michelle Monaghan is the female lead there, and I think that's the movie that discovered her. But it's a very, very good movie, and I think it's both those films, all the films actually, are great examples of Shane Black's dialogue. Now, some of you have not forgiven Shane Black, I'm assuming, for what he did with the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. Now, it's a very clever twist, and I think that, the movie made over $1 billion, and I was okay with the twist, but that's because I was never really into the Mandarin. And I have to be honest here, I'm wondering how many of you were really into the Mandarin as well, because he was never a big character in the comics, and Iron Man comics themselves have never been huge sellers. The movies have always done much better, and we'll talk about elevating B or C level characters to the A leagues in the big screen with the viewer question today. So put a pin in that thought. But so I was fun with what he did with the Mandarin, and I thought it was actually quite brilliant and clever and very Shane Black. The whole well, everyone's seen Iron Man 3 at this point, and if you haven't, you shouldn't be on the internet. But the whole idea that this actor named Trevor was, playing the Mandarin, and it was all just a facade, and he was like this prima donna actor who was method acting, I thought was really clever and really a great commentary on, today's society and world and the way people interact globally and the manipulations that go on behind the scenes. So very clever stuff, very, very smart. So I'm excited to see what he would do with Predator, and I think he's a great choice. And so I'm curious to what you guys think, and if, should Predator not be touched? But if they're going to touch it anyway, is Shane Black the right guy? And do you want Arnold back? And if not Arnold, who do you think would be a good choice for Predator? All right, so the second story of the day, talk about casting. Channing Tatum is really on a roll. Forget Jupiter Ascending being pushed back. He's lucky because he's going to have a great summer without that giant black eye in the middle of it, which I think is all safe to assume that it will be a black eye when it is released in February of 2015. But he's coming off of 22 Jump Street, huge hit for him, biggest opening of his career. It was a live-action property, and he just was cast in the new Coen Brothers movie. How exciting is that? That Channing Tatum would be in a Coen Brothers movie, and I think he has shown a very good flair for comedy. I thought he was a little asleep at the wheel in 22 Jump Street, but he can be very funny. He was very funny in Magic Mike, he was funny in 21 Jump Street, and he had really good moments in 22 Jump Street. And I think, his ability to laugh at himself, I think, is quite admirable. It makes him very likable, and I think that's what's won over a lot of his male fans recently. He used to be just eye candy for the ladies, but I think that his willingness to laugh at himself and be a good bro is what's won him a lot of male fans now as well. So it's great to see him now exploring the more artistic side of his career with the Coen Brothers film called Hail Caesar. And of course, this is great with him coming off of Foxcatcher. I think he's really starting to very cleverly build some traction in this area of filmmaking as well. Now, Hail Caesar in general is coming together really nicely. Just the other day, I was saying, why aren't the Coen brothers directing any movies? They're writing Unbroken, they're writing the Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks Cold War lawyer negotiates a spy's release film that we just discussed, and I said, hey, Coen brothers, that's great that you want to write these movies and all, but when are you going to get back behind the camera? I know you've had some box office misses, but when's that ever stopped you before? You have your cult fan base. And I think maybe Channing Tatum, the casting of, now that I think about it, maybe the casting of Channing Tatum is to try and get those box office numbers back up a little bit. Now, Wes Anderson just recently got his box office numbers up quite high with the Grand Budapest Hotel. I think his best work to date, not only financially, but creatively as well. So it's very exciting for what's going on with Wes Anderson. And it looks like the Coen brothers are going to take a few pages from Wes Anderson's playbook. Because not only do they have Channing Tatum, well, he's unique to them, and also this Hail Caesar movie will star George Clooney and Josh Brolin, Coen brothers staples, but they're bringing over from Wes Anderson's universe Tilda Swinton and also Ralph Fiennes, who of course did a phenomenal job in the Grand Budapest Hotel, so good that I think he'll probably be nominated for an Oscar. I don't know if he'll win, but expect to see him with a nomination, because he was just so strong there, and it was a side that we're not used to seeing for Fiennes, his comedic side. He just was so fantastic, and such subtle nuances as well. He didn't lose his actorly aspects. So what is Hail Caesar about? One trailer I'm reviewing today over on the original regular Beyond the Trailer channel is The Last of Robin Hood. And it's a movie about Errol Flynn. It's behind the scenes about the seediness of Hollywood and an affair that ended up being the end of him. I don't want to give anything away, but you'll see how that sentence has several meanings. But this Hail Caesar movie that Coen brothers are making is also based on a real guy from that tumultuous, seedy period in Hollywood history when the studio system could do whatever they want. Because it's telling the story of a character named Eddie Mannix, a real guy who was a Hollywood fixer in the 1950s for the studios. Covered things up, got things done, but has also a very interesting part of his own personal life, and that he was a suspect in the death of George Reeves, of course, Superman on television, and that was explored in Hollywoodland. You might recall that film where Ben Affleck played George Reeves. But anyway, Eddie Mannix's wife was having an affair with George Reeves, and so he is suspected but never charged, and never went to jail. It was ruled a suicide, I believe. But Eddie Mannix was someone who whispers behind in Hollywood where he was the guy who did who killed George Reeves. So it sounds like a really interesting story. Channing Tatum's going to play a Gene Kelly type actor who, has to deal with manics. We're not quite sure if in a negative manner or if he fixes something for the character, but I think that's a very good casting for Channing Tatum. And I think it's also great, with Foxcatcher, he plays a wrestler, not a very bright wrestler, I believe is the case. And I think it's great that, Channing Tatum is moving into this field of cinema, but yet not overextending himself. He's taking on roles that are a good fit for him. He isn't reaching too high. He's not going to pull an Icarus and reach for the sun and then fall down when his wings burn off. He is taking on roles that are a good fit for him and that he can handle. And perhaps he will become a better actor through making these movies. But I think he's perfectly fine now. He never really has to evolve. He just has to be smart about the kind of movies the roles he's taking, and I think he is. So are you excited to see the Coen brothers team up with Channing Tatum, or would you rather Channing Tatum just go make other action movies? Although he is going to be Gambit, we have a lot to come from Channing Tatum. Very exciting stuff. So that's the second story of the day. Now the third story is we've lost another Hollywood talent to television, although I think this guy really had no other choice. And this is Ruben Fleischer. He's the director of Zombieland, and he was a really hot commodity for a while. And then he kind of really cooled things off with his career with Gangster Squad. The movie was much delayed, and then when it was released, it wasn't worth the wait, and it did not do well at the box office. And Gangster Squad really hurt Ryan Gosling's career as well. Speaking of Josh Brolin, he was in that movie as well. But Josh Brolin has a little bit more backup, and of course, he's Thanos now, so he's fine. But Ruben Fleischer was, of course, up for that Ant-Man gig to take over for Edgar Wright, but he lost to Peyton Reed. That's super embarrassing. With all due respect to Peyton Reed, he doesn't command a lot of respect from Hollywood. So the fact that Ruben Fleischer didn't get the gig shows that he has a lot to do in terms of repairing his relationship, his image in Tinseltown. So what's he doing? He's going to television. He's just signed a 2-year development deal with Universal Television to produce and probably direct some series for cable or network. And I think this is a very smart move because, as I said, he needs to do some damage repair. He needs to up his street cred. He needs to show he still has it. Because where is Zombieland 2? I think it's probably a combination of the fact that Gangster Squad did so poorly at the box office and also that Jesse Eisenberg is busy playing Lex Luthor. It's funny to see all these great projects that Jesse Eisenberg is involved in be sidelined, like Now You See Me, that sequel, Zombieland 2, because of this big commitment to the new DC Cinematic Universe where he's playing a very important role, that of Lex Luthor. But that's exciting, and if they're able to then make these movies, eventually will help them, I would assume. I mean, I don't know if too much time will pass, but we'll see. But I'm curious, what do you think of Ruben Fleischer having to go to television? Do you think it's a smart move? Do you think that he should be able to stick to movies? And what do you think that TV is becoming very much and more so a way to repair one's career and to prove that you still have it? And are we getting to a point soon where it will become just as competitive on the small screen as it is on the big screen? I think for some time now, at the beginning stages, anyone who was a big screen personality could go to the small screen and get a lot of attention for themselves because everyone was like, what are you doing on TV? This must be pretty darn good. It must be a great opportunity or a great project if you're willing to be on TV. But now, who doesn't want to be on TV on one of these great dramas? So we'll see if the days of these easy fixes are coming to an end. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. Now, the viewer question, I thought this was a really interesting one. And it's from Yohanagir82. And Yohanagir says, viewer question, and then in parentheses, pick me. I did pick you. And he or she says, I noticed that I'm getting apathetic about Marvel Phase 3 news because even as a comic book fan, I don't really care about Ant-Man or Doctor Strange. It seems like Marvel is now dipping into its C-level superheroes. But now DC Warner Brothers are finally developing its superheroes who I've always felt were more iconic than even Marvel's best superheroes. Thus, I'm getting a little Marvel movie fatigue, but really excited that finally some other DC characters are finally going to get to be on the big screen. So the question is, do you think others feel like me? And do you think DC Warner Brothers are aware people feel like that and can use it to their advantage? And could it shift into winning the DC Marvel war as DC is just putting out its best characters and iconic characters while Marvel Studios is reaching the bottom of the barrel? Thanks. Love your show. Love your question, Yanagir82. I think that's a really smart observation, and I think to some degree true. Now, Marvel so far has been very fortunate in that they're very good at adding twists to their properties. As we've discussed many times, Captain America the Winter Soldier was significantly increased in terms of quality and interest by being as much a political thriller as it was a superhero action movie. And I think there's some interest in Doctor Strange because of the horror aspects. But remember, horror movies, they never make as much money as superhero movies. So I'll be curious, maybe they'll be keeping the budget down considerably on Doctor Strange, but I'll be curious to see just how high they can get a horror movie to go by adding superhero elements. But I think Marvel, I think Marvel at this point prides themselves on taking characters that are particularly popular in the comics and making them big movie stars. I think they did it with Iron Man. There was a lot of speculation, of course, when that movie first came out, and Thor, because that Marvel covered this themselves in their own special they did, assembling the Marvel Universe on ABC a couple of months ago. Then when they first announced these movies, everyone said, it's too bad you sold off Spider-Man and X-Men because you got nothing left. And Marvel said, oh yes, we do. And they're trying to change the tide, quite controversially in their comic book front as well, by playing up the characters that they make movies for over the characters that other studios own the film rights to. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So yes, I think Marvel is very proud of their ability to upgrade these heroes from C to B to maybe even A level. And I think that they might be challenging themselves a little bit too much. They might be like, well, if we were able to make Iron Man popular, how about Ant-Man? Or how about Doctor Strange? I'm sure that Hawkeye is like, I can't believe I don't have a movie, and Ant-Man is getting a movie. But we'll see. If there's ever a character you think you would introduce in the ensemble first, it would be Ant-Man. But we'll see what happens. That's become quite the lightning rod film, and is getting a lot of attention for its behind-the-scenes drama. But yes, I think that Marvel, as they scrape the bottom of the barrel, and also, I think they could get a level of repetitiveness. We're not quite sure where they're going. But I mean, at the same time, they're the number one, or tied for the number one movie of the year so far. Domestically, I think the Lego Movie and Captain America are tied, but internationally, I believe Captain America: The Winter Soldier is still the top movie. I mean, Mockingjay will knock it off the list, but still, Marvel, it's hard to discredit Marvel when they're doing so well and continuing to do so well. And I do think this assimilation of other genres is going to be their next wave. That's the new phase. That's what's going to be that's what's going to save them going forward. And of course, Avengers: Age of Ultron is quite anticipated. But I do agree with you that the DC scenario of these major stars, these major characters, is a big attention getter. And I think that's why they're doing this Justice League movie. I feel that they looked at their Man of Steel numbers, and I think they feel that without Christopher Nolan, they just can't compete with Marvel, with their one-off characters. They have to jump forward. And I'm very intrigued with, the somewhat different route that Warner Brothers and DC are taking, as we've discussed before. And I'm hopeful. So I think the ideal situation is that we'll like all these movies. There's enough movie ticket money to go around. But I do think there could be a little bit pull of attention away, and we'll see what happens in 2016 when this DC Cinematic Universe starts. We'll also see what happens at Comic-Con this year. Who will win the war of the headlines? I argued that DC won it last year with their announcement that Batman would be in Man of Steel 2, which eventually became not Man of Steel 2. I think they beat out the Avengers: Age of Ultron announcement personally. I know it was close, but I think that Warner Brothers won the day, and then they brought it on home very soon after with the announcement that Batman would be played by Ben Affleck. That was a huge story, whereas the James Spader as the voice of Ultron was not. So we'll see what happens. I'm curious as to if others are suffering Marvel movie fatigue. I think the whole point of a cinematic universe is once you're sucked in, it's hard to leave. It's kind of like when you read comics. They might have a run of bad stories, but you're like, I gotta know what happens. So we'll see. I liked this question because I think it is, eventually will we have to choose? And will there be a choice made from the box office? Even though particular people might not choose, or big, huge comic book fans might not choose, there's a very strong chance that the movie-going audience will choose. For instance, Game of Thrones has really destroyed Mad Men in the ratings on Sunday night because it just became so powerful. And, you would think, who could ever top Mad Men? So you have a situation where DC becomes so powerful with 3 movies a year, they start to draw the attention away from Marvel. Now, of course, those movies have to be good, Zack Snyder and company, and that seems to be the biggest hurdle for DC yet. But as I said, I'm cautiously optimistic about their new plans, and I think they seem like they will be competitive. So what do you guys think? Which side are you on? Do you have Marvel movie fatigue? Are you optimistic for what Warner Brothers is planning? And can you imagine a world where you're more excited about the DC movies coming out, and people in general are more excited about those films than the ones coming from Marvel? Write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you can check out some more episodes right now.